Welcome to the Chief Strategy Officer podcast, a collaborative space for the architects of corporate success, chief strategy officers. In today's interconnected world, no single leader has all the answers. Here, we foster a platform for knowledge exchange where executives who lead strategy can share their unique experiences in tackling complex challenges, navigating disruptive technologies, and driving impactful growth. The CSO role can be lonely and misunderstood, but what if there was a network dedicated to your success? Outthinker Network provides a supportive community of leading chief strategy officers offering time-saving solutions, trend insights, and invaluable peer connections. Visit outthinkernetwork.com to unlock the full potential of your role. Welcome to another episode of the Chief Strategy Officer podcast. Today, we're joined by Eric Goldstein, Chief Strategy Officer at TIAA, to explore the challenges and opportunities of setting up and operating a strategy office. With over 6 years at his current firm and an impressive background in investment banking at JP Morgan and management consulting at McKinsey, Eric brings a wealth of experience to the table. In this episode, we dive into Eric's journey of centralizing the strategy office at TIAA, the importance of aligning strategy with business goals, and how he navigates the complexities of managing a large, mission-driven financial services organization. We'll also discuss the role of the strategy office in fostering cross-functional collaboration, setting organizational KPIs, and striking the right balance between strategy development and execution. Key questions and topics we tackle include a breakdown of the TIAA strategy office responsibilities, how to decide whether to centralize or decentralize the strategy office, keys to building a high-performing strategy team, a CSO's role in setting KPIs, metrics, and measurements in the organization, how to build and maintain strong relationships with key stakeholders, Eric's top 3 recommendations for new strategy officers to drive success. Join us for an in-depth conversation with Eric Goldstein as we uncover the secrets behind building and operating a successful strategy office. Eric, it is great to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time. We have learned at Outthinker Networks so much from your experience building the strategy office. Before we step into the questions, could you just tell us a little bit about what you were doing before your current role and when you joined TIAA?
Sure. So let's just work in reverse chronological order. Prior to TIAA, which I joined almost exactly 6 years ago, I was at JP Morgan as an investment banker in their financial institutions group, focused mainly on mergers and acquisitions for financial institutions. I was there for 19 years. Probably not surprisingly, one of my clients was TIAA. And then prior to that, I was at McKinsey in New York doing what management consultants do, mostly for financial institutions for 4 years. Prior to that, it was in law school. I went to law school intending to be a lawyer, and then in our senior year, McKinsey came to recruit. I was at Yale Law School for the first time ever. They came to Yale, which is not surprising because Yale isn't. You don't think of Yale as a business-oriented law school.
Bastion of capitalism, yeah,
exactly, and it's not. Most people go to clerk for judges and things like that. But they came on campus. They had a lot of success at places like Harvard and Stanford. And I just happened to be, business oriented. And so I got hired, and I just decided that seemed more interesting than being a lawyer.
Excellent. So let's dig in. So you joined TIAA. Maybe we could just start off with today. How does your CEO leadership think of the strategy office? What does it hold the strategy office responsible for?
Sure. And as people who are in this office know, it tends to change every day. It's whatever's most important. But overall, look, we're held to the standard of driving this company to the right long-term business strategy, right? And to do so based on rigorous fact and logic-based analysis. I think also our CEO looks for us to have a thick skin, to stand up for what we believe in to be factually and logically correct, even if it goes against the grain or even at times her first instincts. That makes the job so much more interesting and fun. And so, so there's strategy, and then we do a number of other things. We also run the corporate development function internally, so inorganic growth, execution of M&A, large partnerships. We do competitive intelligence and a range of other things as well within the team.
Maybe you could just tell us then, what is your strategy? Because it sounds like the functions and the roles that you play adapt to the strategy.
Sure. So not everyone knows. So everyone's heard of TIAA, or they used to say TIAA CREF. That's not our brand anymore, but that's, people always say that. But they don't really know what we are a lot of times. So we're a mission-driven insurance company, and those two words matter. I'll get back into that in a second. Set up by Andrew Carnegie in 1918 to provide pension-like retirement programs for teachers. At that time, there was no retirement program, and so he was looking to do it. And the key here is pension-like, right? In 1918, there was no idea that someone would give you money when you retired. When you retired, you got a replacement for your income stream. So he tried to set up a company that would work with schools and universities to do that. Today, except for the lucky few who work for a government agency or one of the few companies that still have a defined benefit plan, everyone else has come to think of retirement as getting a pool of money when they retire. We strongly believe, along with a lot of other behavioral economists, finance professionals, retirement experts, believe that just handing people a pool of money when they retire is not an ideal system. It has proven not to be an ideal system for myriad reasons that spend all day talking about. But we strongly believe that the average American would be better off getting a combination of a pool of money and a guaranteed income stream, even a small one, just enough so that they could sleep comfortably, knowing that they're not going to outlive their money or not be able to pay their basic expenditures. So anyway, so we're this mission-driven insurance company, and as an insurance company, it gives us enormous advantage because there's only two ways to provide a pension-like stream: to be a pension fund or to be an insurance company. That's it. There's no other way that the government would ever allow you to make such a long-term promise. And so most people are never going to get a pension. It's not going to be available. It's not coming back. And so for people to get the closest thing to that, they're going to have to work within the retirement system with an insurance company. And in addition, the other part of it is we're mission driven. We can be focused solely on the needs of the end consumer. We don't have shareholders, and that enables us to return profits, which enables us to provide the highest income streams in retirement. And we combine this with our scale in what we do, how well we're trusted, our near AAA ratings, and our ability to return profits. We really do have a unique set of competitive advantages, and our strategy is focused on these competitive advantages, getting as many Americans to have some portion of their retirement being an income stream.
So you occupy a unique place in the sea of solutions. You serve a niche, like segment, operate in a category, insurance, which is unique. You have an ownership structure that's unique. And then you have a set of competitive advantages. I guess a lot of them would derive from that. Do you mind talking to us about what those advantages are or what your priorities are?
Yeah. And as I've told my company many times, when I came here, I finally realized what we really were. And I worked with hundreds and hundreds of financial institutions from McKinsey and JP Morgan. I was like, there's never been a company that I've worked with that has more unique, sustainable competitive advantages in the world of financial institutions. It's because we've been doing this since 1918. We were built to do this. So we actually have sold hundreds of billions of dollars of this stuff over time. No one else has really done any. If you think about your retirement program, the chances that you have something like this inside of it is very low, unless you are a TIAA client, unless you are working for a university or not for profit. But we have scale. We have the brand. People associate us with this. We're an insurance company with the highest ratings, an enormous capital base. These things are impossible to build, and it takes decades to build that. So scale, we have kind of the inherent advantage of being an already well-capitalized, well-rated insurance company. And we have the ownership structure, which enables us to return profits, not to shareholders, but to our participants. When you think about that and you get your head around it, it's very hard to imagine how, in a world where this product exists, that we are not a leader or the leader in it for those advantages. And so we spend a lot of time trying to get people to understand, in a sense, who have grown up in the last 30 years thinking of retirement as a pool of money, that they're better off and their employers are better off at incorporating a small percentage of the overall plan to be something that is like a pension as opposed to savings account. Mm-hmm. And so that's it. So in some ways, we believe if the world moves in that direction, we win. Or in other words, the participants win.
Right, because you're a collection of your participants.
Yeah.
So, one decision that strategy officers make, and sometimes it's made for them when they are sort of conceptually designing their strategy office, is to what extent to be centralized or decentralized. And I know you have thoughts on that. I was wondering if you could tell us what your point of view is on that.
Getting org structure right is critical for every single thing at a company. Like when companies don't have their org structures right, like nothing seems to work, even if they have the right strategy, even if they're the right people. You just have to have things in the right places. And so I think the decision, again, an important one, depends on the nature of the company. And I think it depends on, at the highest level, on two factors. One is how diverse are the business models of the company. Sometimes companies have diverse business models, but they really share the same competitive advantages. Like maybe it's distribution, or it's access to distribution. They have different products, but that's really the key. And so they seem different, but they share the same basic business model. But if you have a company with diverse business models mm-hmm. and you have, I would say, a well-developed, successful strategy, then there's no reason to not decentralize the strategy function into the business units at some level, right? On the other hand, if you have a focused business model, or at least business models that are focused around the same things, and or you have not a well-developed strategy or strategy is not working, then you want it to be more centralized. If you think about it and you kind of put a 4-box in your head and you had the two axes, like in the classic, diversity on one axis and maturity of strategy on the other axis, in most situations you would centralize. Really, the only situations you would decentralize is when you have diverse business models and you feel really good about the strategies. Mm-hmm. In almost every other case, if you have one business model, it doesn't even make sense to have a decentralized strategy.
It's not efficient.
Yeah. And even if you have diverse business models, if the strategies are really not well honed, I think that in their case, you may also want to centralize it just to get it right first. So I also think the other thing to think about is it affects like what you work on as a strategy. If you have a well-honed strategy, you tend to focus more on execution of the strategy, pushing it forward, maybe growth. If it's not a well-developed strategy, you tend to focus more on the strategy itself. So I think it affects both whether you're centralized or decentralized and what the focus of your work product is.
Got it. And so what about you? As I vaguely recall, you have had periods where you were more tightly centralized and periods where you were more loosely centralized in your tenure as CSO.
When I joined 6 years ago, there was strategy spread out across the organization. Yeah. And it was clear that was not efficient and leading us in some sense into areas where they just weren't based on our core competencies. And so I was asked to help centralize it. Mm-hmm. And that was not an easy task. I would say it took about 18 months. You have to just do it at some level, and you have to earn trust and respect, and you have to get people and businesses who have owned their strategy to say what, to trust corporate basically. To do this for them. And so at first it's just like you just do it. And over time you earn the right to do it. Today we have a very centralized strategy for two reasons. One is I think we've earned the right to do it, but also we have a much more focused strategy today. So it doesn't make as much sense in areas where it does. Like, so for example, as part of delivering the right retirement to people, we also have, not surprisingly, advice. We have wealth managers, we have digital advice, and there's a lot of unique elements to the advice business model as compared to the product manufacturing business model. So not surprisingly, we have a small strategy team that sits within the advice business model. Mm-hmm. But we work hand in glove with them. But besides that, pretty much it's centralized. But it has become more focused on execution. Mm-hmm. As the strategy has been adopted and accepted, we focus more on the execution of it.
It's just a clarification question. When you focus more on execution, is that better served, in your opinion, by a more centralized or decentralized, say, philosophy? Because, you could see execution, happens out there in the business. And so you should be more decentralized. Or you could say it requires precise control and monitoring.
I think it's the former. It's definitely more decentralized. So there are certain things it comes down to. What we then now tend to get involved in more is helping organize efforts across the organization where the outcome is critical. It is it sits across the organization, but the teams now are much more virtual, where we maybe are organizing, pushing forward on something, but the teams are a mixture of people who work on my team, but mostly people who are in the businesses across the organization. And so your instinct is correct. There's no way a strategy team technically can execute anything, right? It has to be executed by the businesses. So we have much more virtual teams now, and that requires a whole different set of competencies, I would say, on the team. But it's also more fun, I think. When things are executing and they're very tight and they're just within a business unit, we don't tend to get as much involved in that. We tend to get involved in things that go across the company.
That makes sense. Yeah, because you have a kind of a coordination function, are able to synchronize silos.
Correct.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about your team, how you built your strategy team and how you thought about, do they all report internally? Do you have dotted lines to other functions? How did you think about who should be on your team and what the reporting structure should be?
Sure. So I'm going to give you a very high level answer first, and I'll talk specifics about my team. Great. So we have sat in various parts of the organization, first of all, at the highest level, like where does the strategy function sit, right? I think in most companies it sits in the CFO's office, but it can sit anywhere, right? It could report directly to the CEO. It can sit in a COO office or CAO office. It could sit in a variety of different places. We have sat under the CFO. We have sat under someone called the Chief Customer Officer, and now we sit under the Chief Administrative Officer. Mm-hmm. I don't think that is as important as, and it goes to, I think most of your chief strategists will say, is that what matters is, do you have a direct positive relationship with the CEO, right? Because the most important thing I could say to any CSO is that you're not the CSO. The CEO is the Chief Strategy Officer. That's not like a throwaway line. That is the absolute truth, right? It is the core function of a CEO, is to set the strategic priorities of the company. And so as long as you have a good relationship with the CEO, it doesn't really matter which part of his organization you sit. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you want to have a good relationship with your direct manager if you're not reporting directly to the CEO. But so that's the first thing to say. So I would say we have generally never cared about where we sit in the organization, because I think we've had that good relationship. First thing you need to do is know what the CEO thinks the CSO function should do and what she thinks the strategy should be, right? It doesn't work. You don't have that. So that's the highest level, I would say, about structure. It doesn't really matter where you sit as long as you have that. So we sit under the Chief Administrative Officer, who has a lot of, I would say, functions that aren't directly business functions or don't have a P&L. Let's put it that way.
I just want to kind of underscore something, if it's sort of linked to that's come out in this podcast, we've heard CSOs say often, is that as soon as you think that you own the strategy, then that's a problem. Other people own the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, you're at best like the proxy for the CEO. You help people understand the strategy and why it's it and why we have to do certain things. But yeah, the company has to own the strategy. There's no question about it. So I have a big team. You know, when I first joined, there were more than 30 people in the Chief Strategy Office. That was too many back then. We cut it almost in half. And then it slowly built over time.
Wow.
Over the last 5 years. Yeah, to where it's about 25.
So just to clarify, those 30 people dispersed and then you brought them in, or were those?
No, they were 30 people roughly in the office in New York. it was too many. And so we cut it back, and then, but it's slowly built up over time. And that size, I would say, reflects the breadth of functions we perform and the general trust the company has in tasking us with helping solve big issues. Perhaps the easiest way to think about us is we're the TIAA's internal management consulting function and its internal investment bank. And because we have been so focused on strategy, not just at the corporate level, but at across the organization, and we have done a fair amount of inorganic things, both exiting businesses like our bank and acquiring businesses, particularly in our asset management group division, Nuveen, we just have a fairly big team of people. We do other things like we help review most board materials that come through us first. We do special projects for the CEO and the EC. So it's just the team has grown over time. I'd also say that we've been very much specifically tasked with being a talent provider for the organization. So I would say in general, we err towards being slightly overstaffed because all year long, people are potentially leaving my team to go work to other parts of the company. And that's been good for the company, and it's been good for us as we get people who we've trained and understand the strategy and know how to work with us in the organization. It just makes our job easier, particularly as we focus more on execution.
So then, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about the team at whatever size it is now, whether that's 30 or more or less. It's a substantial team. How many direct reports do you have, or how many teams do you have, and how are the teams defined?
Sure. So we have about 25 now. Mm-hmm. If you don't count my assistant, I have two directs. If you think the two main functions are strategy and corporate development, I've had a strategy, I've had a corporate development. My background from McKinsey and at JP Morgan as in corporate development, in M&A, that's why it was a neat fit for me in this role. We have a fairly flat organization, obviously, for the reasons why you want a flat organization. You want people to feel that there's a lot of room to growth. You want people to take on whatever responsibility they can take on, regardless of their title. And I think we genuinely run our group like that if you can do it, you can do it. We have associates, even analysts, presenting in front of the executive committee and the CEO and even the board if they can do it. And we try to give everybody, I would say at the senior associate level and above, some direct management, right? So we have senior associates managing analysts, we have directors managing associates, because obviously that's a critical skill to develop over time. Mm-hmm. So I only have two business directs, really.
Okay, got it. And then it sounds like you have a fairly kind of deep pyramid, not for desire for command and control, but for developing talent and building management experience in your team.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
And of course, yeah, it's accurate. And like we started talking about before, at any given time, we are managing people from outside our team. Anyone who's worked at a management consulting firm would know this model, right? You could be having many people from within the business that you're at. If you're at a management consulting firm or the company you're at, you could be managing dozens of people outside of your core team, right?
Yep.
At least as a part-time job for them. We occasionally effectively second people from other parts of the organization to work with us on important projects. But it shape shifts over time.
So let's dig a little bit into KPI setting. What's the role of the strategy office in setting organization-wide KPIs and aligning those KPIs with the various operating committees or functions?
Yeah, I think this question is actually, now I think about it, very similar to the centralized, decentralized question.
Okay.
I think when I first joined, and it may also because I was reporting to the CFO at that point, but I think it was really because we were shifting the strategy and we were pretty dramatically changing the key things that the company managed itself against, KPIs being one of those things. We were asked to go in and actually develop them. And so for the first few years I was here, it was part of our function, actually, to work on the KPIs with the businesses, with the CFO, with the CEO. At TIAA, I assume other companies, there's, even the CEO has, her goals, her almost KPIs that the board uses. When I first joined, we were asked to work on those too. And that's critical. Obviously, it's the things that people get paid based on ultimately are not in line with, don't support the strategy. Obviously, the strategy is not going to get executed. So at a minimum, I would say a chief strategy officer should have a voice in that process. But today, because they're much better honed and they're tied to the strategy, and we've been executing on our core strategy for over 3 years, we don't get that involved anymore. It's become decentralized. Like, it goes back, it's gone back to the CFO's office or whoever else owns it. But I do think it's critical to make sure that those are aligned with the strategy.
Got it. And where does tracking, reporting, KPIs, monitoring them, reviewing them, where does that sit?
Overall set of KPIs and other financial metrics and business metrics and operating metrics that are considered to be important, I believe those are controlled at the CFO level, which makes sense, right? They're collecting all the data of the organization. A lot of this is financial data. In some ways, it's easy to set the KPIs at the corporate level. The question is, how do those fan out into the organization so that if you're sitting in a call center somewhere or you're a salesperson, how do your individual management metrics relate at the corporate level, right? That's the hard part. That's where it tends to break down the most in any organization. And that's a real problem, because at the end of the day, all that matters is what people touching customers and people actually doing the business think is important.
Okay, got it. Here's a question. We didn't discuss this question ahead of time. What I'm hearing, especially from your organization, that it's a large organization. You use decentralized coordination. So maintaining working relationships with multiple stakeholders, as big as TIAA is essential to you being able to be effective. So how do you maintain those relationships?
Sure. Let me say kind of overarching thing, and then I'll say specifically how I maintain the relation, how we maintain relationships. I talked about the CEO. Like, the CEO has to respect you, certainly, but the CEO has to like you, because they have to want to work with you. You're their voice in some ways during different times, because again, I see the CEO as the chief strategy officer. You can't get everyone else in the organization to like you. It's not a realistic goal, because the job of the chief strategy officer, the job of strategy, is to prioritize resources. That is if you have to say it at the most simple level. And that means your strategy at any one time is going to prioritize resources in one area over another area. Certainly, if you're changing strategy, that gets exacerbated, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think your realistic goal for people across the organization is that they respect you and your team. They respect your team's intelligence, their work ethic, their intellectual rigor, and their incorruptibility. I think the CEO needs to think all those things about you and your team, but also has to like you. If your goal is to have everyone, the rest of them like you, then you're in big trouble. It's great if they like you. You try to be empathetic, but at the end of the day, you have to accept that your job is to help the company move in the right direction. So we have direct relationships with every senior executive in the company, across function, across business function, across tech, everywhere. I personally have regular Zoom meetings with every person on the executive committee.
Mm-hmm. With what frequency?
Those are set up to be monthly.
Okay.
I talk with Tashunda almost weekly, although we're set up generally bi-weekly. There'll be just some reason to catch up. And then all of their direct reports, so I would say that maybe the top 50 or 60 people in the company, me or Geddes, my chief strategy officer, or Javier, the head of corporate development, we're talking top 50 or 60 people in this company all the time. Mm-hmm. It is critical. But it takes time. Like, developing credibility, just like it is when you're in a management consulting company, it takes time. Like, you just don't walk in and get it. It takes a long time. You really have to focus on what I said before. Are you doing fact-based analysis? Are you being logical? Mm-hmm. Are you listening and changing your opinion as new information comes in? But at the end of the day, are you standing up for what you think is right? At the end of the day, I think people respect that, even if they disagree with you.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I love how intentional you are and structured you are with it. But it also sounds like, since you are continually working with people, you also are using those points of contact that are part of the work to also strengthen and maintain the relationship.
I mean, the people we're talking about have the hard job. I have the easy job.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to sit and think about what the right things to do, and to know that my decisions are not going to result in anyone on my team losing a job or having to do something completely different. In some ways, it's the benefit of a strategy office being separated, right? It's like you want there to be a team who doesn't have those pressures so that they could think broadly.
Right.
But the people who have to do or have to, they have the hard job. We try as best we can to be incredibly empathetic to that fact, while at the same time understanding that we have to stick to our guns around what we think is the right answer.
Gotcha. Starting to reach the top of our time with you. Put yourself in the shoes of a newly appointed CSO. What would be the top 3 things that you think she or he should be thinking about or doing to put themselves on a path to success?
So one of them is easy. We already talked about it. You need to ask yourself, do you have a strong relationship with the CEO? Or how are you going to develop a strong relationship with the CEO? That's the first question. Because, again, I just don't know how the job works if you don't. Again, the CEO is the real chief strategy officer, and you better know what she wants out of your role and what her substantive views on strategy are. I mean, you can help work with him or her in developing them, but you better know what they are. Second obvious thing is your team up to the task? I think you need just 2 qualities in everyone on your team, and everything else you can teach. These 2 qualities you can't teach, and you need to have them. You need people with big brains and clean agendas. I can't teach someone to be a good person. I can't teach them to be smart. Everything else, the industry, how the company works. But if someone has a big brain, but they're out to themselves and they're out for their career promotion and they just want to take credit or whatever the issue is, I can't fix that. It's too hard. It's too painful. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing I would say is you look around your team, forget about what they do, forget about what they know. Do these people have really big brains, and are they decent people that you want to work with and you want to put out into the organization to deliver difficult messages empathetically? Obviously, if they know the industry and they know the company well, that's great. But I think the first 2 things I said are the most important. So that's the second thing I would say is your team up to the task. And I guess the third thing is you have a good sense realistically of what the biggest barriers to success of your job. So like of getting the company to adopt the right strategy based on core competencies. What are the biggest barriers, right? So for example, you better know who in the organization has interest in your strategy succeeding and who doesn't. You better know who they are and have a strategy, because the company has to be working like a machine or it doesn't work. There's a bunch of other things that can affect whether you can succeed or not, but you have to face them head on, accept them, not hope they go away. Figure out what the biggest barriers to success are in your specific organization, and be realistic about them and have a plan.
Well, I love it that you just formulated that here too is remarkable. The last 2 questions here. Are there any specific tools or resources or journals or sources of information that you'd recommend other chief strategy officers, whether they're experienced or they're fresh in their roles? So
maybe it's because I spent my whole life with financial institutions and strategy and M&A. I actually don't spend a lot of time reading strategy or business books. They kind of pile up in our office library as we get them. There is one business podcast I like, the Acquired podcast. It does really deep dives into business models and things like competitive advantages and why companies succeed or don't succeed. Really deep dive. So it'll do like 7 hours on Amazon, for example.
Love it.
What I do is talk to lots of people in the industries we compete in. As well as, chief strategy officers at other companies. I ask them about their issues, and as long, we're obviously careful about what we talk about and what we share, particularly if they're competitors. I just enjoy talking to them and hear how they solve their issues. I find that to be the most useful way to pick up new things and to think differently. But I think the most important thing that I get from things I do outside is like to do this job right, you need to have a flexible brain. You need to be a constant learner. You need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You need to move on when you're wrong, adapt new things. So I would say you need a flexible brain. And so I try to do things out of work that foster that. Like physics scared me when I was in college. So now I read physics all the time. Because with physics, you have to be okay feeling dumb. Even physicists, they say the universe doesn't care that the rules of the universe are non-intuitive.
Yeah.
So being comfortable with things that are non-intuitive is a good thing. So I don't know. I think I spend most of my time out just trying to like push my brain around in different directions more than like the specifics of business.
I love it. That is, I think, a perfect end to our podcast here. There's so many other avenues for us to explore. Anything that you didn't get to say or any last shout out that you'd like to give?
No, I just want to say, like, I work for a great company. It cares deeply about the people who work for it. It has an important mission. I really do believe, we really do believe, it's because of what we do. We really do believe that the average American should have some of their retirement that looks like a pension. Think about, you're a police officer, 23-year-olds join the police academy. They want to do a good job, but they talk about that they're going to get a pension. And yet most Americans can't even conceive of that. It's to the point where they don't even think about their retirement as being pension-like anymore. And so what we're trying to do is just change the world a little bit to say, pensions aren't coming back, but we can get you a portion of your retirement that looks like a pension. And that you will almost certainly have a more comfortable, sanguine retirement if you have that.
Thank you guys for doing that work. Thanks for sharing with us, Eric. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Chief Strategy Officer podcast. To join a community of strategy leaders, visit outthinkernetwork.com/apply. Until next time, let's keep the conversation going and rewrite the future of strategy together.